We have to start pushing back on lies and deceptive narratives with each other. We can only stay silent about the emperor's lack of new clothing so long while his dick repeatedly slaps us in the face. There is a common narrative going around that the people voted for Trump and Elon to do precisely what he is doing. And I'm going to tell you why this is bunk, nonsense, or my personal favorite, horsepucky. Dangerous horsepucky. The reason the legislative branch is colloquially called, or colloquially referred to as the first among equals, and why it is written under Article 1, is because this is the primary way that we have a voice in our society. Not only because there's greater representation, but because it is tasked with actually making the laws. The House seats are up for re-election every 2 years, and while a given Senate seat is up for election every 6, they are staggered so that every 2 years, 1/3 of the whole of Senate members are up for re-election. This is where the will of the people is acted out, both due to the ability to put the public pressure on elected officials and the fact that this branch actually makes the laws that are signed in and carried out by the executive. Stephen Miller recently argued from this same narrative, saying, well, the whole government should be run by the president because the whole nation votes for him. It's the only election where the whole nation votes for one person. Well, of course it's a national vote if you understand the actual role that the Constitution outlines for the president. He has the power to veto or sign laws created by Congress, create a cabinet through congressional consent, oversees foreign policy and trade, which impacts everyone, and oversees the execution of laws by managing federal departments, which also impacts everyone. So yes, what he is prescribed to do by the Constitution impacts us all, hence a national vote. But it is called the executive branch for a reason, because it is supposed to execute the laws, not create its own version of the laws and try to force people to do that. Now, I'm sure this is difficult for Trump to understand, as he is used to having absolute power in how he runs his companies. He is used to a power structure where what he says is law, and anyone not doing what he says, or maybe even just that disagree with him, they should be fired. Now, while this may work for a company, although that's debatable, this mindset is disastrous for government, particularly if you value freedom and having a voice in your government. And yes, you may feel disenfranchised and that the government doesn't listen to you. But if you believe this narrative, you will always feel disenfranchised because he or people like him are trying to sell you on the idea that voting for the president is how your voice is heard in our representative democracy. And that is not true. Horsepucky. This false narrative is trying to use people's ignorance of how the government works to stoke anger and garner support for the firing of federal workers. Some incorrectly claim that the people voted for FBI reform and DEI or whatever by voting for Trump. But this is not how the Constitution works. If people want these things, fine. But they have to go through the legislative branch, where they have actual representation and where the laws are actually made. Of course, people in these bureaucratic positions don't do Trump's explicit bidding. They're not there for that. They are there to work in the nonpartisan roles, carrying out the tasks defined in the creation of these roles by Congress. Labeling them as unelected bureaucrats who are against democracy is a way to get good people to look the other way when they are getting fired for no just cause. I know many federal workers. They are literally our friends and our neighbors. These are real people, good people, who are simply doing their jobs most of the time, keeping us safe, and a vast, vast majority of which are not bloat or purveyors of waste or fraud. But Trump knows that if he can fire enough people, then he will be left with only people loyal to what he wants, which means he can circumvent the legislative branch and effectively assume that power. If a law has no funding or no one there to actually perform it, and he gets to control these things, then he effectively gets to create the law. If you support this false narrative that the people voted for Trump to do what he is doing, then you are supporting the idea of an executive branch only. And the executive branch is run by one person. You are supporting the idea of an autocracy or a monarchy or something that resembles the governments of something like Russia, think hard about if this is something that you truly stand for.